let me show you what are the various steps that we have to follow. Now there are various steps that we have to run both at the master's end and the slave end, and then a few commands only at the master's end to bring up the cluster, and then one command which has to be run at all the slave ends so that they can join the cluster. Okay, so let me get started by showing you those commands and those installation steps which have to be run commonly on both the master's end and the slave end. First of all, we have to update your repository. Okay, since I'm using Ubuntu, I'll have to update my apt-get repository. Okay, and after that, we will have to turn off the swap space, be it the master's end or the slave's end. Kubernetes will not work if the swap space is on. Okay, we have to disable that. So there are a couple of commands for that. And then the next part is we have to update the host name, the hosts file, and we have to set a static API address for all the nodes in your cluster. Okay, we have to do that because at any point of time, if your master or if your node in the cluster fails, then when they restart, they should have the same IP address. If you have a dynamic IP address, and then if they restart because of a failure condition, then it'll be a problem because they will not be able to join the cluster because they'll have a different IP address. So that's why we have to do these things. All right, there are a couple of commands for that. And after that, we have to install the OpenSSH server and Docker. That is because Kubernetes requires the OpenSSH functionality, and it of course needs Docker because everything in Kubernetes is containers, right? So we are going to make use of Docker containers. So that's why we have to install these two components. And finally, we have to install kubeadm, kubelet, and kubectl. Now these are the core components of your Kubernetes. All right, so these are the various components that have to be installed on both your master and your slave end. So let me first of all open up my VMs and then show you how to get started. Now before I get started, let me tell you one thing. You have a cluster, you have a master, and then you have slaves in that cluster, right? Your master should always have better configurations than your slave. So for that reason, if you're using virtual machines on your host, then you have to ensure that your master has at least 2 GB of RAM and 2 core CPUs, okay? And your slave has 2 GB of RAM and at least 1 core CPU. So these are the basic necessities for your master and slave machines. On that note, I think I can get started. So first of all, I'll bring up my virtual machine and go through these installation processes. So I hope everyone can see my screen here. This is my first VM, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this my master. Okay, so all the commands to install the various components are present with me in my notepad. Okay, so I'm going to use this for reference and then quickly execute these commands and show you how Kubernetes is installed. So first of all, we have to update our apt-get repository. Okay, but before that, let's log in as su. Okay, so I'm going to do a sudo su so that I can execute all the following commands as sudo user. Okay, so sudo su, there goes my root password, and now you can see the difference here, right? Here I was executing it as a normal user, but from here I'm a root user, so I'm going to execute all these commands as su. So first of all, let's do an update. I'm going to copy this and paste it here. apt-get update updates my Ubuntu repositories. All right, so it's going to take quite some time, so just hold on till it's completed. Okay, so this is done. The next thing I have to do is turn off my swap space. Okay, now the command to disable my swap space is swap off space flag A. Let me go back here and do the same. Okay, swap off with flag A. And now we have to go to this fs tab. So this is a file called fs tab. Okay, and we will have a line with the entry of swap space, because at any point of time, if you've enabled swap space, then you'll have a line over there. Now we have to disable that line. Okay, we can disable that line by commenting out that line. So let me show you how that's done. I'm just using the nano editor to open this fs tab file. Okay, so you can see this line, right, where it says swap file. This is the one which I have to comment out. So just let me come down here and comment it out like this. Okay, with a hash. Now let me save this and exit. Now the next thing I have to do is update my host name and my hosts file and then set a static IP address. So let me get started by first updating the host name. So for that, I have to go to this file host name, which is in this /etc path. So I'm again using nano for that. You can see here it's edureka-virtualbox, right? So let me replace this and say kmaster as in Kubernetes master. So let me save this and exit. Now if you want your host name to reflect over here, because right now it says root@edureka-virtualbox. The host name does not look updated as yet. And if you want it to be updated to kmaster, then you have to first of all restart this VM or your system. If you're doing it on a system, then you have to restart your system. And if you're doing it on a VM, you have to restart your VM. Okay, so let me restart my VM in some time. But before that, there are a few more commands which I want to run. And that is set a static IP address. Okay, so I'm going to copy this ifconfig. I'm going to run the ifconfig command. Okay, so right now my IP address is 192.168.56.101. And the next time when I turn on this machine, I do not want a different IP address. So to set this as a static IP address, I have a couple of commands. Let me execute that command first. So you can see this interfaces file, right? So under etc/network, we have a file called interfaces. So this is where you define all your network interfaces. Now let me enter this file and add the rules to make it a static IP address. As you can see here, the last 3 lines are the ones which ensure that this machine will have a static IP address. These 3 lines are already there on my machine. Now, if you want to set a static IP address at your end, then make sure that you have these things defined correctly. Okay, my IP address is .101, so I would just retain it like this. So let me just exit. So the next thing that I have to do is go to the hosts file and update my IP address over there. Okay, so I'm gonna copy this and go to my etc/hosts files. Now over here you can see that there's no entry, so I have to mention that this is my kmaster. So let me specify my IP address first. This is my IP address, and now we have to update the name of the host. So this host of mine is kmaster. So I'm just gonna enter that and save this. Okay, now the thing that we have to do now is restart this machine. So let me just restart this machine and get back to you in the meanwhile. Okay, so now that we are back on, let me check if my host name and hosts have all been updated. Yes, there you go. You can see here, right? Edureka@kmaster. So this means that my host name has been successfully updated. We can also verify if my IP address is the same. Let me do an if config. And as you can see, my IP address has not changed. All right, so this is good. Now this is what we wanted. Now let's continue with our installation process. Let me clear the screen and go back to the notepad and execute those commands which first of all install my OpenSSH server. So this is going to be the command to do that, and we have to execute this as sudo user, right? So sudo apt-get install OpenSSH server, that's the command. Okay, let me say yes and enter. Okay, so my SSH server would have been installed by now. Let me clear the screen and install Docker. But before I run this command which installs Docker, I need to update my repository. Okay, so let me log in as sudo first of all. Okay, sudo su is the command, and okay, I've logged in as root user. Now the next thing is update my repository. So I have to do an apt-get update. Now again, this is going to take some more time, so just hold on till then. Okay, this is also done. Now I can straight away run the command to install Docker. Now this is the command to install Docker. Okay, from the apt-get repository, I'm installing Docker. I'm just specifying -y because -y is my flag. So whenever there's a prompt that comes in while installation saying, do you want to install it, yes or no? Then when you specify -y, then it means that by default, it will accept y as a parameter. Okay, so that is the only concept behind -y. So again, installing Docker is going to take a few more minutes. Just hang on till then. Okay, great. So Docker is also installed. Okay, so let me go back to the notepad. So to establish the Kubernetes environment, the 3 main components that Kubernetes is made up of are kubeadm, kubelet, and kubectl. But just before I install these 3 components, there are a few things I have to do. They are like installing curl and then downloading certain packages from this URL and then running an update. Okay, so let me execute these commands one after the other first and then install Kubernetes. So let's first of all start with this command where I'm installing curl. Okay, now the next command is basically downloading these packages using curl. And curl is basically this tool using which you can download these packages using your command line. Okay, so this is basically a web URL, right? So I can access whatever packages are there on this web URL and download them using curl. So that's why I've installed curl in the first place. So when executing this command, I get this, which is perfect. Now when I go back, then there is this which I have to execute. Okay, let me hit enter and I'm done. And finally, I have to update my apt-get repository. And the command for that is this one, apt-get update. Okay, great. So all the pre-installation steps are also done. Now I can straight away set up my Kubernetes environment by executing this command. So in the same command, I say install kubelet, kubeadm, and kubectl. And to just avoid the yes prompt, I'm specifying the -y flag, okay, which will by default take yes as a parameter. And of course, I'm taking it from the apt-get repository, right? So let me just copy this and paste it here. Give it a few more minutes, guys, because installing Kubernetes is going to take some time. Okay, bingo. So my Kubernetes has also been installed successfully. Okay, now let me conclude the setting up of this Kubernetes environment by updating the Kubernetes configuration. Okay, so there's this file here, right? kubeadm.conf. So this is the kubeadm is the one that's going to let me administer my Kubernetes. So I have to go into this file and add this one line. Okay, so let me first of all open up this file using my nano editor. So let me again log in as sudo su, and this is the command. So as you can see, we have these set of environment variables. So right after the last environment variable, I have to add this one line, and that line is this one. All right, now let me just save this and exit. Brilliant. So with that, the components which have to be installed at both the master and the slave come to an end. Now what I have to do next is run certain commands only at the master to bring up the cluster, and then run this one command at all my slaves to join the cluster. All right. So before I start doing anything more over here, let me also tell you that I have already done the same steps on my node. So if you are doing it at your end, then whatever steps you've done so far, run the same set of commands on another VM, because that will be acting as your node VM. But in my case, I've already done that just to save some time, So let me show you that this is my K master, and right here, I have my K node, which is nothing but my Kubernetes node. And I've basically run the same set of commands in both the places. But there's just one thing which I have to ensure before I bring up the cluster, and that is ensure the network IP addresses and the host name and the hosts. So this is my Kubernetes node. So first of all, I'm going to do a cat and say /etc hosts. Okay. Now over here, I have the IP address of my Kubernetes node. That is this very machine. And I've specified the name of the host. However, the name of my Kubernetes master host is not present, and neither is the IP address. So that is one manual entry we have to do. If you remember, let me go to my master and check what is the IP address. Yes, so the IP address over here is 192.168.56.101. So this is the IP address I have to add in my node end. So I have to modify this file for that. All right. But before that, you have to also ensure that this is a static IP address. So let me ensure that the IP address of my cluster node does not change. So the first thing we have to do before anything is check what is the current IP address. And for my node, the IP address is 192.168.56.102. Okay. Now let me run this command, network interfaces. Okay. So as you can see here, this is already set to be a static IP address. You have to ensure that these same lines are there in your machine if you want it to be a static IP address. Since it's already there for me, I'm not going to make any change, but rather I'm going to go and check what's my host name. I mean, the host name should anyways give the same thing, because right now it's Knode, so that's what it's going to reflect. But anyways, let me just show it to you. Okay, so my host name is Knode. Brilliant. So this means that there's just one thing which I have to change, and that is nothing but adding the particular entry for my master. So let me first clear the screen, and then using my nano editor, in fact, I'll have to run it as sudo. So as a sudo user, I'm going to open my nano editor and edit my hosts file. Okay, so here, let me just add the IP address of my master. So what exactly is the IP address of the master? Yes, this is my K master. So I'm just going to copy this IP address, come back here and paste the IP address. And I'm going to say the name of that particular host is K master. And now let me save this. Perfect. Now what I have to do now is go back to my master and ensure that the host file here has details about my slave. I'll clear the screen, and first I'll open up my hosts file. So on my master's end, the only entry is there for the master. So I have to write another line where I'll specify the IP address of my slave and then add the name of that particular host, that is knode. And again, let me use the nano editor for this purpose. So I'm going to say sudo nano / etc hosts. Okay. So I'm going to come here, say 192.168.56.102 and then say knode. All right. Now all the entries are perfect. I'm going to save this and exit. So the hosts file on both my master and my slave has been updated. The static IP address for both my master and the slave has been updated. And also the Kubernetes environment has been established. Okay. Now, before we go further and bring up the cluster, let me do a restart because I've updated my hosts file. Okay. So let me restart both of my master and my slave VMs. And if you're doing it at your end, then you have to do the very same. Okay. So let's say restart. And similarly, let me go to my node here and do a restart. Okay, so I've just logged in. And now that my systems are restarted, I can go ahead and execute the commands at only the master's end to bring up the cluster. Okay, so first of all, let me go through the steps which are needed to be run on the master's end. So at the master, first of all, we have to run a couple of commands to initiate the Kubernetes cluster, and then we have to install a pod network. We have to install a pod network because all my containers inside a single pod will have to communicate over a network. Pod is nothing but a network of containers. So there are various container networks which I can use. So I can use the Calico pod network, I can use the Flannel pod network, or I can use anyone. You can see the entire list in the Kubernetes documentation. And in this session, I'm going to use the Calico network. Okay, so that's pretty simple and straightforward. And that's what I'm going to show you next. So once you've set up the pod network, you can straight away bring up the Kubernetes dashboard. And remember that you have to set up the Kubernetes dashboard and bring this up before your nodes join the cluster. Because in this version of Kubernetes, if you first get your nodes to join the cluster, and after that, if you try bringing the Kubernetes dashboard up, then your Kubernetes dashboard gets hosted on the node. And you don't want that to happen, right? If you want the dashboard to come up at your master's end, you have to bring up the dashboard before your nodes join the cluster. So these will be the three commands that we will have to run: initiating the cluster, installing the pod network, and then setting up the Kubernetes dashboard. So let me go to my master and execute commands for each of these processes. So I suppose this is my master, and yes, this is my master. So first of all, to bring up the cluster, we have to execute this command. Let me copy this, and over here we have to replace the IP addresses. So the IP address of my master, right? So this machine, I have to specify that IP address over here because this is where the other IP addresses can come and join. This is the IP address of the master, right? So I'm just saying API server advertise the address 56.101 so that all the other nodes can come and join the cluster on this IP address. And along with this, I have to also specify the pod network. Since I've chosen the Calico pod network, there's a network range which my Calico pod network uses. So CNI basically stands for Container Network Interface. If I'm using the Calico pod network, then I have to use this network range. But in case if you want to use a Flannel pod network, then you can use this network range. Okay, so let me just copy this one and paste it. All right, so the command is sudo kubeadm init pod network followed by the IP address from where the other nodes will have to join. So let's go ahead and hit enter. So since you're doing it for the first time, give it a few minutes because Kubernetes takes some time to install. So just hold on until that happens. All right. Okay, great. Now it says that your Kubernetes master has initialized successfully. That's good news. And it also says that to start using your cluster, you need to run the following commands as a regular user. Okay, so note that log out as a sudo user and as a regular user, execute these three commands. And also if I have to deploy a pod network, then I have to run a command. Okay, so this is that command which I have to run to bring up my pod network. So I'll be basically cloning the YAML file which is present over here. So before I get to all these things, let me show you that we have a kube join command which is generated, right? So this is generated at my master's end, and I have to execute this command at my node to join the cluster. But that would be the last step because, like I said earlier, these three commands will have to be first executed. Then I have to bring up my pod network. Then I have to bring up my dashboard, and then I have to get my nodes to join the cluster using this command. So for my reference, I'm just going to copy this command and store it somewhere else. Okay. So right under this, let me just store this command for later reference. And in the meanwhile, let me go ahead and execute all these commands one after the other. These are as per Kubernetes' instructions, right? Yes, I would like to rewrite it. And then, okay. Now that I've done with this, let me first of all bring up my pod network. Okay, now the command to bring up my pod network is this. Perfect. So my Calco pod has been created. Now I can verify if my pod has been created by running the kubectl get pods command. Okay, so this is my kubectl get pods. I can say -o wide all namespaces. Okay, by specifying the -o wide and all namespaces, I'll basically get all the pods ever deployed, even the default pods which get deployed when the Kubernetes cluster initiates. So basically the Kubernetes cluster is initiated and deployed along with a few default ones, especially for your pod network. There's one pod which is hosted for your cluster. There's one pod for your pod itself. And then there's one pod which is deployed for your dashboard and whatnot. So this is the entire list, right? So for your Calico, for your etcd, there's one pod. For your kube controller, there's a pod. And we have various pods like this, right? For your master and your API server and many things. So these are the default deployments that you get. So anyways, as you can see, the default deployments are all healthy because it says the status is all running and everything is basically running in the kube system namespace. All right. And it's all running on my K master. That's my Kubernetes master. So the next thing that I have to do is bring up the dashboard before I can get my nodes to join. Okay. So I'll go to the notepad and copy the command to bring up my dashboard. So copy and paste. So great. This is my Kubernetes dashboard, which has, basically this pod has come up. Now, if I execute this same kubectl get pods command, then you can see that I've got one more pod which is deployed for my dashboard basically. So last time this was not there because I had not deployed my dashboard at that time, right? So I had only deployed my pod network and whatnot and the other things, right? So I've deployed it and the container is creating. So in probably a few more seconds, this would also be running. So anyways, in the meanwhile, what we can do is we can work on the other things which are needed to bring up the dashboard. To first of all enable your proxy and get it to be hosted on web server, there's this kubectl proxy command. Okay, so with this, your service would be starting to be served on this particular port number. Okay, localhost port number 8001 of my master. Okay, not from the nodes. So if I could just go to my Firefox and go to localhost 8001, then my dashboard would be up and running over there. So basically my dashboard is being served on this particular port number. But if I want to actually get to my dashboard, which shows my deployments and all my services, then that's a different URL. Okay. So yeah, as you can see here, localhost 8000/API/v1, right? This entire URL is which is going to lead me to my dashboard. But at this point of time, I cannot log into my dashboard because it's prompting me for a token. And I do not have a token because I have not done any cluster role binding and I have not mentioned that I am the admin of this particular dashboard. So to enable all those things, there are a few more commands that we have to execute, starting with creating a service account for your dashboard. So this is the command to create your service account. So go back to the terminal and probably a new terminal window, execute this command. Okay, so with this, you're creating a service account for your dashboard. And after that, you have to do the cluster role binding for your newly created service account. Okay, so the dashboard has been created in default namespace as per this. Okay, and here I'm saying that my dashboard is going to be for admin and I'm doing the cluster role binding. Okay, and now that this is created, I can straight away get the token, because if you remember, it's asking me for a token to log in, right? So even though I'm the admin now, I will not be able to log in without the token. So to generate the token, I have to again run this command, kubectl get secret key. Okay, so I'm going to copy this and paste it here. So this is the token, or this is the key that basically needs to be used. So let me copy this entire token and paste it over here. So So let me just save this. And yeah, now you can see that my Kubernetes cluster has been set up, and I can see the same thing from the dashboard over here. So basically by default, the Kubernetes service is deployed, right? So this is what you can see. But I've just brought up the dashboard now, and my cluster is not ready until my nodes join in. So let's go to the final part of this demonstration, wherein I'll ask my slaves to join the cluster. So you remember I had copied the join cluster which was generated at my master's end in my notepad. So I'm going to copy that and execute that at the slave's end to join the cluster. Okay, so let me first of all go to my notepad, and yeah, this is the join command which I had copied, right? So I'm going to copy this, and now I'm going to go to my node. Yeah, so let me just paste this and let's see what happens. Let me just run this command as sudo. So perfect. I've got the message that I've successfully established connection with the API server on this particular IP address and port number, right? So this means that my node has joined the cluster. We can verify that from the dashboard itself. So if I go back to my dashboard, which is hosted on my master's end, so I have an option here as nodes. If I click on this, then I will get the details about my nodes over here. So earlier I only had the K master, but now I have both the K master and the K node. Give it a few more seconds until my node comes up. I can also verify the same from my terminal. So if I go to my terminal here, and if I run the command kubectl get nodes, then it will give me the details about the nodes which are there in my cluster. So kmaster is one that is already there in the cluster, but knode, however, will take some more time to join my cluster. All right, so that's it, guys. So that is about my deployment, and that's how you deploy a Kubernetes cluster. So from here on, you can do whatever deployment you want. Whatever you want to deploy, you can deploy it easily, very effectively, either from the dashboard or from the CLI. And there are various other video tutorials of ours which you can refer to see how a deployment is made on Kubernetes. So I would request you to go to the other videos and see how